Black Indian because I wanted to tell the story of my family. And writing Black Indian has allowed me to uncover heritage. It's allowed me to uncover lost traditions and culture. But it's also allowed me to tell my mother and my sister's stories. And I want to be clear about, it is a story that talks about being bi-ethnic or biracial or triracial. It's about being mixed blood, and it's about what it meant to be on that migration trail for my family, my ancestors, and how the migration trail functioned as erasure for us as African Americans who married American Indians, who were the grandchildren of mulattoes, indentured servant white women and Africans, who married on the master's plantation. So that, there's a lot, right? So I do want to tell that story of migration. I purposefully have traced my ancestors' journey from North Carolina and Virginia into Kentucky and Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then finally Michigan. Because I think it's important for me to give voice to their journey and how hard it was to have to sell your homeland. In 1831, Nat Turner's rebellion was, for Nat Turner and the people who rebelled, it was a necessity at that time, to have an insurrection. But after that insurrection, the free people of color suffered, and the slaves suffered. And my folks, my ancestors, after that rebellion, they were like, we need to move. And actually, even before that rebellion, I have to say, restrictions were tightening on mixed bloods and free people of color. So writing this book has been a way for me to kind of talk about that. One thing too, while they were on the migration trail and while they were moving from state to state and just suffering atrocities and discrimination and prejudice, these kinds of things, but they lost things. They lost language, they lost culture, they lost ancestors' names, they lost so much. But the thing about being a Black person in America is we are resilient. And so when they lost something, they gained something else. It was losing that farmland or selling that farmland and moving to gain a sense of freedom and to gain a sense of autonomy, as someone who worshiped whatever it was they wanted to worship, or to marry whoever they wanted to marry. And I will say that in Indiana, one of my branches of my family, they're the Roberts family, and they have the Roberts settlement, and my predecessor's papers are actually in the Library of Congress. Elijah Roberts as being this mixed blood person, and the family lore is that an African slave married an American Indian woman, and that's how their lineage started. And then there's another piece of that lineage that says that African slave was actually the son of a master and an African woman. And so if that's the beginning of, the man, the white master who came from Cornwall, who married an African woman, who had a son who he actually couldn't claim as his son, and then that son married an American Indian woman, right there you have three nations, right? So this excites me. That recovering that heritage and that lost tradition and that culture really, really excites me. And at the same time, there's a sense of sadness sometimes when I see how some of my ancestors have been just left off of the rolls, or just kind of erased from reservation. I shouldn't say it like that, but they have been. If they left the reservation, then they were taken off the rolls. if they escaped the reservation or if they left their tribe, you couldn't claim. You couldn't claim your tribal history and your tribal heritage. So Black Indian is definitely about that. It's about recovering that lost history, ancestry, heritage. But my memoir is also about telling my mother's story and telling my aunt's story as these beautiful, young, mixed blood girls growing up in the Midwest. These, beautiful and just hot, like they knew it. The story was that their grandfather had to have a gun for each one of them because they were so beautiful. But they were also kind of the property of their father, and they became the property of their husbands, and they had no voice for themselves. Like they had no, it's almost as if they had no real identity out of being a daughter, and then being a wife, and then being a mother. And for me, as a writer, that's so hard. As someone who has tried to express themselves with language and to write about what it means to be a woman, I couldn't imagine only being those things and not being myself, or not having a moment to figure out what it was I wanted to do in this life. But I will say I was a young mom. I had my daughter at 21. I was far too young to have a daughter, I think. And my daughter kind of became my sister. Like, I raised her, and she raised me. We raised each other, I'll say that. But I think that because I had a daughter, and because I knew that there were secrets in my family, and I truly believe that secrets disrupt identity. I think secrets in your family become the thing that forms your identity. And maybe I'm just a precocious child who didn't get talked to enough or didn't get hugged enough. But I honestly believe I'm also a writer who set out to tell the stories that I needed to hear as a young mixed blood girl.